If a wannabe Formula 1 giant is on the right track, would it be part sold, and should it be championing a season that ended considerably less competitive than it started as one with no negatives at all? It's what you might be asking about Aston Martin, which towards the end of 2023 made a significant announcement. Outside investors were coming in for the first time since Lawrence Stroll's consortium bought the assets of Force India in 2018. The news followed quite intense speculation about Stroll's intentions for the team and came at the back of a season in which Aston Martin had genuinely been F1's most improved entry, but had also been on a worrying decline at the same time. There had been unsubstantiated rumours for a while that 5 years on from creating what would morph into what we now know as Aston Martin, Stroll was looking for a way out. That also coincided with questions about his son Lance's future after a rough run through the middle of the season. Then news dropped of Arctos Partners' investment in the team. With the value unspecified, beyond confirmation it is just the minority shareholding, and reporting from the likes of the Financial Times and Reuters that it valued Aston Martin's F1 team at around $1 billion. Even minority investments trigger questions about whether it's the start of an exit strategy for the original owner, and given the rumours that preceded the Arctos investment, that was inevitably the case with Aston Martin. But the message is clear: Lawrence Stroll is going nowhere, Aston Martin the brand is going nowhere, and this team is dead serious about its intentions. Aston Martin's commercial and marketing boss Jefferson Slack told us that Stroll is not a seller and that the Arctos group doesn't buy majority stakes in anything, so this is exactly the opposite of a hint of an exit strategy. And Stroll himself declared in a New York Times interview that he wouldn't have dumped hundreds of millions on a new headquarters and a hiring spree if he was about to disappear with his tail between his legs, stating he plans to run the car company and the F1 team for many years to come. Stroll has made everything happen for this organisation since the formation of Racing Point midway through 2018. The takeover he led of Aston Martin Lagonda facilitated rebranding this team as the Aston Martin Works entry. He has set the ambitious target of fighting for world titles in the next few years and greenlit massive investments in talent, like lead driver Fernando Alonso, Group CEO Martin Whitmarsh and Technical Director Dan Fallows, as well as huge infrastructure projects such as the new factory and wind tunnel. So if Stroll got fed up, bored or disillusioned with it, sparked by seeing something he didn't like or the fierce scrutiny of his son's struggles perhaps, then it would raise massive questions about the team's future. But the part sale seems more like a matter of timing. Aston Martin's a better proposition now, and maybe Stroll and his partners wanted someone else to come in to help with the next phase, not necessarily just through funding, but through other connections, as Arctos comes with a massive commercial network. So it does look like it will still be Stroll at the helm for the foreseeable future, and his commitment to Aston Martin is unmoved. But is the team progressing as much as his lofty expectations demand? Zooming out and comparing the past season to 2022, as team principal Mike Krack insists is necessary to review a full season, Aston Martin could reflect on a points haul 5 times greater and a tally of 8 podiums for new star signing Alonso. Krack was even bold enough to declare the season one of maximum positives and claimed he didn't see any negatives, which Alonso agreed with. Giving Krack the benefit of the doubt, yes, when evaluating Aston Martin's performance from the end of 2022 to the end of 2023, it cannot be viewed as anything but a success. But the season also bore the tinge of disappointment, and it would be either naive or disingenuous to pretend otherwise. Narrative and momentum do matter in F1. Aston Martin started strong and tapered off, whereas a reversal of that trajectory would have given it the kind of obvious excitement that McLaren has generated by its own in-season rise. It would also have marked an impressive 2-year ascent from the bottom of the championship standings in early 2022 to consistent podium contention and occasional challenging of Red Bull by the end of 2023. Progress is rarely so linear in F1, but the rate at which Aston Martin dropped off during a single season, having started so strongly, was a notable setback. And the reliability concerns, car issues and questionable development mean the season was partially marred. That's why, despite the overarching review of the year being no negatives at all, Krack actually admits that when you zoom in, problems are uncovered. Aston Martin went through a lot in 1 year, much more than the gradual drop from regular podium finisher to the 5th best team in the championship the picture might suggest. Struggles with development, infrastructure limitations and the associated technical challenges exposed underlying deficiencies that left Aston Martin at the mercy of its rivals' revivals. Manufacturing, supply and technical problems caused various issues through the season, mainly on Lance Stroll's side of the garage, and sometimes the car simply wasn't quick enough. Krack preaches safety, reliability and operations first, and at times it felt like Team Silverstone fell short of this and in turn its historically excellent record of executing weekends to the maximum. This reality contrasted with the team's ambitious public statements about fighting for second in the championship, as Aston Martin's points hauls generally dried up and its return got weaker as the year progressed. And while it didn't completely nullify the fact 2023 was a good season overall, it exposed the fragility of the team's early position and helped show how much further Aston Martin still has to go to meet Stroll's targets, which do go well above what was achieved in 2023. It's not as though Aston Martin just has to sharpen up its processes in 2024 to suddenly become a consistent frontrunner. The AMR24 has to address some key weaknesses. Beyond the early part of 2023, where the car was very competitive, especially on Sundays, and seemed like a decent all-rounder, some issues became apparent as rivals upped their game. Tyre management, strategic execution, and team motivation were all cited by Alonso as quite consistent positives from 2023. But he also pointed out on more than one occasion that he was too vulnerable on the straights. It was obvious through the year that the car lacked straight-line speed, and Aston Martin's initial confidence that this would be mitigated by aerodynamic packages and choices as the season progressed proved ill-founded. This left Aston Martin in a problematic loop, as it would have to reduce the rear wing level to improve its straight-line speed, which would cost too much cornering performance. The more concerning issue, though, is how the AMR23 became a more complicated and arguably worse car as it was developed, despite a lot of bullish rhetoric around the upgrade plan through much of the year. Alonso reckons Aston Martin gradually found the car had more of a narrow operating window and exacerbated that with the new parts it brought. Aston Martin ended up experimenting with different floor specifications over 2 race weekends to get to the bottom of what was working and what wasn't, having been left on the back foot with a quite different car characteristic to understand. The team rebounded to a degree late on by showing its capability to address issues with the AMR23, but still an undercurrent of concern about the effectiveness of its in-season upgrades existed to the end of the year. Alonso reckons that the experiments and the general knowledge gained in 2023 has left the team with a better understanding of the development direction it needs to take. But he also admits there is no magic bullet, and Aston Martin saying it knows what it needs and proving it can do it are two very different things. Since Stroll set out a broad 5-year plan in 2021 to eventually turn Aston Martin into a title contender, there is no doubt that the progress until now supports the narrative that it is a team on the rise. But if 2026 is when Aston Martin has wins or even a title fight in mind, logic dictates that 2024 will come too soon. So what kind of step is expected, and perhaps more pertinently, what kind of step is needed to show Aston Martin is actually on the right path? It's worth remembering the circumstances that made Aston Martin's leap possible at the start of 2023, because that changes how you view its year, how you judge how much progress it's really made, and what to expect from next season. The surge at the start of 2023 surprised many, including us, so we're not pretending like we saw it coming, but it was a more natural progression flattered by circumstance rather than a dramatic single leap. Remember that by the end of 2022, Aston Martin was regularly in contention for points, and maybe even had the 5th fastest car, despite only finishing 7th in the championship. Though this position didn't readily suggest the team was on the cusp of a major advancement, it was clearly on an upward trajectory, and in better shape than the final 2022 result had indicated. This was obviously built upon over the winter, with Aston Martin doing an excellent job with its baseline version of the AMR23, which facilitated progress, leapfrogging midfield rivals McLaren and Alpine. But as Mercedes and Ferrari started the year out of shape as well, it left a big gap between Red Bull and the end of 2022 best of the rest, and Aston Martin did the best job of anybody else in 2023, so it duly slotted into that gap at the start of the year. This clearly gave Aston Martin a big opportunity, but in hindsight, Alonso admits the team wasn't ready for it. Crack concurs that Aston Martin found a much harsher development race than when it was picking itself up from a slow start in 2022 and working its way up the midfield. And he believes the realistic view is that Aston Martin was lacking the firepower of the teams it started 2023 ahead of, so staying there was always going to be a tall task. It's true to a point. Aston Martin moved into a new factory during 2023, but that facility is incomplete, and its brand new wind tunnel is still not online. It's also still recruiting, playing catch up in terms of sheer human resource as much as anything else. Basically, this is a team still in transition, and Aston Martin will probably not benefit from the same situation this winter as it did 12 months ago, with rivals unlikely to open the door quite so generously. With that in mind, the true test for Aston Martin will be demonstrating it's really learned from what held it back in 2023, tidying up the race weekends, rebalancing the car's performance profile, and showcasing better innovation within its young technical structure. Success will hinge on its ability to not only assimilate the most effective concepts from across the field, which gave it a great base as so many big brains joined from rival teams, but also to introduce original and effective designs as Aston Martin, that then evolve through the season. With the infrastructure ever improving, even if still unfinished, there are no excuses not to improve this. Otherwise, even if he remains committed, Stroll might start to question when this prolific investment will pay off.